This is the Trading Psychology Podcast. This is VP, creator of No Nonsense Forex and author of the book No Nonsense Forex Trading Psychology. And with me, as he always is, he is the Sultan of Maverick Currencies and the Flat Earth Trading Society. He is Rob Reinhold.
Well, hey, Patrick, how's it going? Sultan, that's a good one. I like that one quite a bit. Good to be here. Always love to talk trading psychology. Let's jump into it.
So a bit of an unusual episode, I would say, compared to what we normally do here. But something that, again, I would imagine that this has affected the lot of you at some point, because we all love trading and we all get really excited about it, or at least, depending on how many years you've put in, you're probably still in that new car smell stage, and you want to share this excitement and this happiness and this hope of a better life with other people. And even better if it's somebody who you already know and who's somebody who's close to you and in your inner circle. And what I would say is just understand it's not always that easy. I would even go as far to say, Rob, that it's probably pretty darn difficult, and especially because maybe they inquire about it, they show a little bit of interest, and that just perks up all of your sensors, and you're like, wow, I'm going to get this person on board, and it's going to be awesome, and I can't wait. And we have all these ridiculous expectations, and rarely do they ever manifest themselves the way we would like. Fair to say, and can we go ahead and make an entire episode out of this? I think we can.
Oh, we can definitely make an entire episode out of this. But I want to be very clear about what this episode is about. In this episode, we're going to be talking about when you want to share this with someone and you sit down and you say, hey, let's go over trading. Let's talk about it. Let's help you get an account set up. I was so excited. After about a year and a half of trading, I was so excited. I grabbed some of my friends. I grabbed my brother, and I'm like, you guys got to come do this. This is awesome. You've got to come and do it. And I was just so excited. I want to do this episode not for the people that you're going to be talking to. This isn't a how to get them, to be successful. This is not about them at all. This episode is about you. When you dive into this process, you are going to do some things to possibly sabotage it and to possibly do some things that are going to cause you some pain in the future. This episode is all about you in this process of sharing trading with other people and helping people out with their finances, whatever it is you're going to do. We want to make sure that you are doing it the right way.
So yeah, I've wanted to do it. You've wanted to do it. You've actually done it. I've actually done it. I have not been very successful at all. And I think really what it comes down to is choosing the right person. I think my mistake in the past is finding somebody that might have exhibited maybe one or two traits that you need to become, successful in this endeavor. But it takes a lot more than that at the end of the day. Would you agree?
Would I agree? Patrick, this is literally the story of my first couple of years. And I think I've told this story before in one of the podcast episodes, but I'm going to tell it again because it's perfect here. When I got started trading, I really wanted my wife to do it with me. I really wanted her to do it with me. And I kept trying to talk to her about it, and she showed no interest. It's actually one of the reasons I really fell in love with her is that she didn't care about money. She didn't care about money at all. It didn't matter to her. It just wasn't a thing. And for me, that was, of course, my whole thing. So I was trying to get her to be interested in trading and try to do it with me, and she wasn't showing much interest. And then I thought, okay, well, what about if I get her interested in shopping? And so I came up with this plan, this idea that I was going to set up an account for her, and we were going to trade together, and she could take all the money she made and go shopping with it. And I thought, okay, so that was a plan. I set up an account in her name, put $5,000 in it. I told her about it. I'm like, hey, I already set up this account, and we're going to do it together. And over the next month, I kept trying to bring it up, and she's like, oh, I'm busy. I'll do it tomorrow, or we'll do it next week, or whatever. And finally, one day we were walking in the mall, and I said, oh, do you want to go into the Gap? Now again, remember, this is back in the 90s. So don't judge me on that comment, because again, this was back in the 90s. And she said, oh no, the Gap is terrible. Their clothes have gone terrible. No one likes them anymore. So I said, great, let's go home and short the gap. And she looked at me like, what? What does that mean? So, I explained to her what shorting was. And so we got home after going to the mall, and we got in her account, and we sold some shares of the gap short. And then she said, well, I really like Target. I love Target. Every time I go in there, I end up spending $200. And what about Target? We looked at the chart. The chart looked good, so we bought Target. So over the next couple of weeks, Target went up, the gap went down, and she ended up cashing out. I think she had about a $1,300 gain, if I remember correctly. And I got a withdrawal for her, put it in a bank account, and she went shopping. And I thought to myself, oh man, I got her. She's going to be so excited. We're going to be that husband-wife trading team. And not a word after that. And finally I said, didn't you love that? Don't you want to do that again? She's like, no. I said, don't you want to learn how to trade? She's like, no, that's what you're for. I just want to be a mom. And I'm like, yeah, okay. So yes, I have very, very firsthand experience about taking someone who really has no interest in this and try to force them to do it, all because of my ego of what I wanted and what my expectations were. Yeah, I definitely have experience with this. And this is one of the reasons for this episode, is to make sure you guys don't fall into some of these pitfalls like I did.
Yeah, so my story is a bit different. I at least realized from the start that nobody within my friend group or my family was really anything like me. I've always been the weirdo and the oddball in those groups. And so I pretty much knew not to pitch this to them. But when I go out, I'm often very social. I have no problem talking to people. And usually at some point in time, whether it's a bartender or just a friend of a friend or somebody you meet out, they'll ask you what you do. And then, I was waiting tables, which is unexciting, but I was also a Forex trader, which is exciting. So guess which one I led with? I would always talk about Forex trading. They're like, oh, what's that? Because Americans don't know what Forex is. And so that would take a bit of explanation. But some people would really perk up and be really interested in it. Now, these are strangers. I don't know what their qualities are, but at least they have the interest. That's way more than I would ever say for my family or my friend groups. And so that was something to really go on. And so, sometimes we would exchange numbers or emails or something like that. And then I would tell them where to go. The same place I tell everybody to go to babypips.com and learn. And I said, once you're done, come back to me and I'll tell you what to do from there. Honestly, Rob, if I told 50 people, I only had one person out of the 50 come back. And I actually helped them a little bit up front because this is before I had my channel. And that was kind of right when I was starting my channel. So I kind of took them over there and they watched some videos there. And that's really the last I heard from them. So out of 50 people, it was one person. And to my knowledge, that is as far as they ever got. Maybe they're still trading right now. I don't know. But that's a really bad ratio. That's a lot of wasted time and energy that I spent trying to get people onto something that at the end of the day, they might have shown interest, but they just don't have what it takes to even complete baby pips and then send me a response email. Like, to me, that's nothing. That's sure to most of our listeners, that's a drop in the ocean of what it really takes to do this. So I guess my question to you is, I'm going to put you on the spot here because I don't see this on our notes. Despite the obvious, if you're talking to somebody for the first time, or if it's somebody maybe you work with or kind of know, what would you say are 2 green light qualities somebody should probably have before starting something like this? And what are 2 red light qualities that if you are aware that they have these particular qualities, trading is almost certainly not for them? And again, try to avoid the obvious.
All right. So for green lights, I'm going to give 2. Passion. Someone with passion. The second green light, someone with, I'm going to say work ethic. Now, I coached my kids' soccer teams, and I love doing it. I love coaching my kids' soccer teams. And I remember my daughter's soccer team, we were playing some games and we had some good players, but the other teams were just so much more physical than us. And whenever there was a 50-50 ball, our players didn't go in there as hard. And so we're losing all the 50-50 balls, and my girls are always constantly getting like knocked to the ground, and they just weren't tough enough and they didn't want the ball enough. So I decided, as a brilliant head coach of a 9-year-old girls soccer team that I needed to toughen them up. And so for one whole week in practice, all we did was a drill where I had one girl on one side, one girl on the other side. The ball was in the middle. I'd say go, and they had to fight for the ball. And whatever girl won the ball, the other girl had to take a lap in running. So I had some incentive for them to try hard. And you know what? That week of practice was the worst week of practice. Everyone cried. And you know what? We showed up to the game on Saturday, and guess what happened? No one wanted to get the ball, and everyone got pushed down. And I right then I realized you can't coach someone to want the ball. I can show you all the skills. I can do everything else. But if you don't want the ball, there's nothing I can do for you. So the green light, Patrick, are someone who wants the ball, someone who has passion, and someone who has work ethic.
Okay, and it kind of reminds me of this maybe 10, 15 years ago. It was the Oklahoma State college basketball team was playing soft, and so the coach actually had them practice in football pads, and it actually worked. It was a mind shift, saying that, look, you know, if you go up for that rebound, you're gonna be fine. You know, it's not going to kill you. And it actually worked. I don't know how long it worked, but it's a bit antithetical to what you were talking about. But again, we're talking about college-age athletes compared to 9-year-old girls. You know, the passion was probably there. Maybe they were just not playing as aggressively as they should, and they just needed a little bit of a tweak right there. But I know exactly what you're saying. And I think with most people, you know, if you can tell what they're really into, like, is this person really into music? Is this person really into video games? Is this person really into gardening? You know, whatever it is, if they have a passion for something and they're willing to not only go all the way with it, but almost make it part of their identity to a degree, you might actually have a real candidate on your hands. That's something. But if you actually know somebody and you can't think of anything they really do or what they're really into, I think that's a good way to maybe just, you know, go somewhere else with this. So I like those two a lot. Now, do you have any red light qualities that aren't just the opposite of what you just said?
Yes, I definitely have some red lights. So the first one is going to be someone who is a compulsive gambler. And again, maybe they're not a compulsive gambler, but they just have that mentality. But this next one, I've been so thoughtful about this because I've thought deeply about what does it take for someone like off the street to be a great trader? And this is what I've come up with, Patrick. And I don't know if this is right or wrong, but this is what, after 25, 27 years of experience doing this, I need a risk taker, but they can't take too much risk. So if you take a look on a spectrum from like someone who is not a risk taker, taking no risk whatsoever, to someone who is an all-out risk taker, I need someone who's at least in the risk-taking half. So if you can think of like a little meter from like to the left, like all the way no risk, to the right all the way total risk, I need someone that's at least past the midpoint, that they are willing to take risks, but at a certain point, that risk-taking becomes a negative, and it's really difficult to get that one to succeed because part of trading is not taking too much risk. And when you take a full-on risk-taker and you tell them don't take too much risk, it's really against their personality. So I don't know how to quantify that, but I've thought very deeply about this question. I need someone in that area that's willing to take risks, but not willing to risk at all. So outside of those areas, that's my red light.
Gotcha. And I'm smiling when you're saying this because I think that fits me to a T. Like, for example, you know, I invest in crypto and not just Bitcoin. And that seems absurd to a lot of people. It makes them think I'm a lunatic. When in truth, you know, I'm risk tolerant for sure. But I typically only stick to large cap tokens at the same time. So I'm not all the way there, but you know, you could say probably most of the way there. So, you know, if you know anybody that fits that criteria as well, I would agree. Probably a good candidate. Now, we're getting a bit off track here, and I'm okay with that personally. But just a kind of an off-topic question, would you say, now think about this one, would you say that a recovering drug addict or a recovering alcoholic might actually make a good trader because they can refocus that energy or that addictive personality into something like this? Or do you think it's too risky for them to do something like that given all the emotional ups and downs of this market? I'll give you time on this one.
This is a fantastic question. And I wish you and I were at a bar somewhere with some drinks in our hand, because this would go on all night. It would be amazing. I see both some positives and negatives with this. I think initially I was like, this is an absolute positive, because behavior change is the most difficult thing a human being can do. It really is. A true behavior change. And someone who has gone through that process has literally done everything we've talked about in the Trading Psychology podcast. Now, look, it's with money, it's with trading, but I'm telling you what, it's the same. It's taking your natural inclinations and how do you get your natural inclination? How do you not follow that and go and do something else, even though you didn't feel like doing it, it wasn't natural? So that process is very similar. So I think somebody that has gone through that process, a very difficult process, much more difficult to get off of substances than to learn how to trade. I can tell you that much. Absolutely. I think it's a real positive. But on the other hand, I do hear stories of people that do go through the programs and they do behavior change about not being addicted to drugs and alcohol. But it's very common that I hear them just switch their addiction to something else. It's shopping, it's exercise, it's something else. It's part of their personality, so maybe they can't get rid of it all the way. So I think if that's what they're using trading for, is just to replace an addiction, I think we've got a whole bunch of new problems with that.
Yeah, it's interesting too, because I've seen a lot of people who like later in life became super duper fitness experts, or they find religion and get really, really deep into it. And so, they're the addictive personality never went away. They just replaced it with something else, and they were able to go full force into it for the positive. So that's a really interesting thought. Let me pose this to the audience too, to the listeners out there. If any of you have ever suffered from either of those two addictions, or an addiction to something else, and you trade now, how's that experience going? Do you feel like it was an actual benefit? Do you feel like it's almost a borderline superpower that you've gone through that before and now you're going through this now? I'd be really curious to hear from anybody who might actually fit this criteria. So if you're not listening to this on YouTube, I know the majority of you don't, go to YouTube and just know that every episode is on YouTube. Look this one up and let us know down below in the comments section. I would be fascinated to hear somebody's experience who has gone through something like this.
I am going to be glued to the comment section for the next month or two. So please share it, because I think this is a very, very interesting topic.
For sure. But I know we're getting a bit too off course here. So let's get back on and talk about, if you do find somebody, given what we've told you already, that you think would fit the criteria and you would love to share this opportunity with them, how should that process actually go? Because this is something I've never thought of. And maybe the reason why some of these people didn't really go through all the way with it was maybe it was on me. Maybe I didn't approach it the right way. I couldn't even really tell you what I said or did, and go back that far and think. But I'm not ruling it out. Maybe I could have handled this a different way. So Rob, if you had to start it all over with somebody, how would you actually go through the process? What do you think is the most optimal way?
I've had a lot of people come to me in my life, and I've got right now nieces and nephews who are now getting into their 30s and they're starting to get really into finance, and they come to me and look, I always have an open door, but this is how I approach it. If you want help, the door is open. And I tell them, don't say anything now. I said, I want you to go at home and really think about it. And if this is something you want to do, I'm here. I'm here 100%. But I need you to really go home and think about it and really think about what it means. And I talk to them about this is what it's going to take. I tell them all, it's 3 to 7 years until you are good enough at this to make this a stable living, or at least a stable part of your cash flow. And this is what it's going to take. And you tell them, don't let them say yes right then, because everyone says, yes, that's what I want. Yes, of course, that's what I want. No, let them go home. Let them think about it for a month. And if they still have that passion and fire after a month or a week or whatever it is, and they reach back out to you, they're coming to you. I think that's the right way to do it. I think you just make offers and make them very general. Like, hey, you know what? If it's something, they come, hey, trading is great. I've started dabbling around, hey, can you help me out? Like, hey, look, door's open, but this is what it takes. If that's what you want to do, let me know and we'll get going. So I think you have to have them take the first step. Don't push it on anyone. Make them chase you down and make it difficult. Give them like little jobs. Hey, read this book first. Read this book first and we'll talk. Make sure that they are the ones that are chasing you down for the information, not you pushing on them.
So I feel better then, because that's pretty much what I did. And so I feel like I did that part the right way. But then, let's say you get that 1 out of 50 or whatever the case is that actually follows through and gets to that point. Now, that's really rare, like we spoke about before. So you feel like you might really have something here. But as we know, Rob, the failure rate in this game is extraordinary. It's off the charts. If you have somebody like that, maybe already in your life, who is going through this process, or at least trying, or at least has some enthusiasm behind it, what type of expectations should we have going forward with this person? Because I think it's easy to get overexcited, because for once you actually have somebody that you personally know who's going through the same thing you're going through, and you can share ideas with and things like that. But I think it's a little too easy to get carried away. Like I said, I've never had somebody really in my life that I could do this with, but I feel like if I did, I would have to really restrain myself from going overboard here.
What you just said about expectations is really what this entire episode is about. Expectations. And I remember years ago, my brother and his spouse were having some marital issues, and they were on their way of getting divorced. And in one of their last sessions together, my brother told me that their counselor told this to him. And he said once he said this, he's like, I knew where everything went wrong. And this is what the counselor said. Well, expectations are a bitch. And he explained that of all the couples that he's met with, it's more about the expectations that one person had of the other than it was about the actual behavior that they did. And so when my brother looked back and looked at his expectations, he realized that, yeah, he was partly to blame. When at first he was like, no, it's all her fault. It's not my fault. But the expectations are the things that disappoint us. The expectations of who that person is going to be. And this is not just in trading. This is in everything with life and relationships and jobs. Like, the more expectations that you put on it, the greater pain you're going to feel when it fails, or if it fails. Expectations are a bitch. Now, I have a philosophy in life. I look at every situation, and I never think best case scenario, because if I reach best case scenario, it was as expected. I do I'm not worst case scenario, but I'm more like in the middle. Hey, if it's better than average, I'm happy. If it's worse than average, okay, obviously it wasn't good. But those expectations, setting the right expectations in your life will greatly depend or determine the outcome of things. So if your expectations of this person that you are working with is that they are going to be a superstar millionaire trader, you are setting yourself up for failure, and you're also setting up that relationship for resentment and hurt feelings. The expectations going into this are the right thing. And your expectations should be, after you've gone through the process and understand it, the expectation is that they work hard. That they work hard. Nothing else is a guarantee, but that is something they can control.
I think that's really great. And I can almost, when you talk about relationships, I can almost tie this into dating as well. There's a couple reasons why. Now, I'm in my 40s and I'm not married, but I think a big reason early on, and I'm actually a bit thankful for this looking back on it. I really like where I am in life right now, and I don't have any regrets here. But a big change I made in the way I approach dating and women in general is I used to get so frustrated. And I think this happens with people like me, that they just weren't thinking logically enough, and so many things they do and say just don't make sense, and there's no consistency. And God damn it, why can't they just think like a man? Why can't they just think like I do? And it took me a long time to realize that they don't think that way because they're not men. And they can be just as intelligent, if not more, than you are, but they do things differently. They have been hardwired over the course of millenniums to survive, just like we do. But they do it in a very different way, and you can't fault them for that. That's how they do things. We do things this way, they do things that way. And that was a big shift for me because, you should always have expectations going into a relationship, of course. You have to have something. But my expectations, I think, have become a lot more general, if that makes any sense. And I have been able to enjoy and appreciate women, I think, a lot more than I have before. And my relationships now, even though they typically still don't last very long, have been very fruitful. And and a lot of them I still talk to later on in life. But there is that change you have to make. Expectations cannot be specific to you. I think that's the big takeaway there. And because I never really had a protege or anybody personally in my life like that, I can at least connect it to that. Because, man, I know so many people that just their entire lives, they have these really specific, rigid expectations that, for the opposite sex, that only apply to their own sex. And it's crazy. And I'm so glad I broke out of that. And again, we keep going off on tangents here, Rob, but I think we can tie a lot of this back to what we're talking about here. But that was just one of the biggest revelations I had. And as somebody who actually got married early and found the one who's completely different, did your expectations change over time? I'm curious to know while we're on this subject, even though this was somebody you were committed to and married to.
Before I answer that very loaded question, I just want to touch on something you said. And I don't even know that you said it or you recognize that you said it, but this is so poignant. Expectations say more about you than it does about them. I love that. Your expectations are about you, not the other person. So when you have expectations on the other person, it's you with those expectations. So, yeah, beautiful. Let me get into your loaded question about marriage.
It was so loaded too. You nailed it.
My wife and I have had the easiest marriage I've ever seen. We are still best friends. We still just are deeply in love with each other. We're crazy about each other. But marriage is also the hardest thing I've done. And the reason I say that is that it takes constant effort. And just think about how much you change from age 23 up to age 40 where you are. And imagine you had someone who is going through just as much change, if not more than you, during those times. Your expectations of who she should be are landmines in all those decades of change. And, one thing we always wanted for each other is we wanted the other to be happy. That was the most important thing, more than anything else, is that she's always wanted me to be happy. So when I came home, when she was 7 months pregnant with our first kid, and told her, I want to be a trader for my life, a lot of people would be like, no, that's not what I expected my husband to have a job that paid a stable living. And he wants to go do this crazy thing. All she said was, go for it. And same thing, whenever she wanted to do something, it's like, I'm your biggest fan. So back to the expectations. If you just have expectations of love and acceptance, and again, you be totally honest with them about your process, and Patrick, that's something that people value so much with you, is that you tell them your negatives. You tell them your pains and your stumbles. Tell them that and let them know the whole thing. And then have no expectation of them, because that says something more about you. If they love it, if they're passionate about it, they'll put in the work. And we've talked about how trading is just an engineering problem. It's just going to take time and effort. But if you have these expectations, you're going to set this relationship up for failure. You should just want them to be happy. That's it.
So a few things on that. Yeah, I completely agree. Expectations go both ways. Remember that. They have expectations of you as well. And yeah, the good news is unlike a marriage, you're not going to have to, a lot of things you would do in a marriage, you can not have to do on a relationship like this with somebody who might be studying under you or just somebody who you gave this information to and let them run with it. Either way. But one thing I do want to touch on before we close out here, Rob, is the very last point you have on these notes, because this one hits home. You have under expectations. They might blame you if they fail. Now, we know the fail rate in this industry. Chances are they are going to fail. What is their reaction going to be? I think I almost can't fault people for this sometimes, because I know how it would feel to put in this much time and effort and passion into something and feel like you haven't made it. But be ready for that. As a YouTuber that gets blamed for everything when people don't make it, this could happen to you too. And how would you personally deal with something like this, Rob, if it was somebody that you actually cared about?
Ooh, that's a tough situation, because at that time there is nothing to do. If it gets to that point, then they had expectations, and they tied you to those expectations. And it basically says that you didn't either weren't aware of those expectations, or you didn't do anything to reset those expectations. So this is why I said, in the beginning, be brutally honest about the business. Be brutally honest with how long it takes. That's what I do. And I do it to discourage people. I mean, honestly, when I talk to people and they're like, hey, I've been wanting to get into it. I'm like, hey, don't get into it unless you absolutely love it. People ask me all the time, like, is your son, my son's 22 now, is he going to get into trade? Is he going to be a trader? And I'm definitely not pushing him at the moment, because he is not at the right place. And if I push him, it's going to be bad. And that's where the resentment comes from. When you let them come to you and you're just guiding them along this process, and you're telling them, hey, it's going to take you a couple of years of study and back testing, and you got to build systems and test those systems. If you've built the expectations the correct way, they really shouldn't be able to come back on you in the end and say, this is your fault, if you set the expectations correctly.
Yeah, that's the point I was going to get to if you didn't get to it. Yeah, a little bit up front goes a long way. I feel like I did a decent job of this on my own channel, but I could have actually made a dedicated video just outlining expectations for people going forward. I just didn't know what the rest of my videos were going to look like at the time, so I didn't do it. I'm almost considering making a video in 2024 and putting it near the very start of my playlist saying, look, before you dive into this, here's what you have to know. Because as you and I both know, when we first enter this market, our expectations are completely different from reality. So I think that would be a good idea. So yeah, maybe I took a little bit out of this myself. But thank you, everybody, for listening to the Trading Psychology Podcast. I think this has been a really great episode, Rob. Let's do it again next week. We hope you join us. We'll see you then.
Goodbye, everybody.